Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've spent the last 15 years taking care of the same cemetery. Small place, surrounded by forest on 3 sides, and a quiet rural road on the 4th. The nearest town is about 15 miles away, and nobody ever visits unless they have a reason. Usually a sad one. I liked it that way. My name is Roy. I'm 52, never married, no kids. My job? Keep the grass short, trim the hedges, rake the leaves, and make sure the grounds are clean and peaceful. I also dig graves when needed, though these days most folks prefer cremation. So I mostly had the place to myself, working in silence while the birds chirped and the wind rustled the trees. Peaceful, predictable, until yesterday. June 1st. That date's etched into my head now. The day everything changed. It started like any other morning. I was out by Section D, hauling branches from a downed tree. A thunderstorm had rolled through the night before, tearing through the woods and dropping a couple of limbs across the path leading to the older section. That's where the oldest headstones are, worn down by wind and time, barely readable. No one ever visits that area anymore, but I keep it clean, out of respect. It was around 9 a.m. when I noticed something strange. One of the headstones was cracked. I'd seen my share of erosion and weather damage, but this was fresh. A long, jagged split down the middle like something had hit it hard from below. Dirt was pushed upward too, like the earth had heaved. At first, I figured it was a sinkhole, or maybe a tree root growing under it. I made a note to report it later, but the moment I turned to walk away, I heard a sound. Scrape. Like something dragging across stone. I froze. There wasn't supposed to be anyone else out here, no burial scheduled, no visitors. Just me and the wind. I slowly turned back to the broken grave. The ground around it had shifted. Fresh dirt was falling inward, like something was moving beneath it. I stood there for a good minute, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe water erosion. Maybe an animal burrowing. I don't know. My brain tried to rationalize it while my gut screamed something was very, very wrong. Then I saw the hand. It came out slowly, trembling like a newborn fawn, pale, dirty, fingers caked in soil. It grabbed the edge of the cracked headstone and pulled. I didn't scream. I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I backed away, one step at a time, heart hammering like a drum in my chest. Another hand emerged. Then a face, bloated, bruised, dirt sticking to the skin like glue. Eyes pale and cloudy, lips torn but twitching, moving. The thing let out a groan, low and wet, and started pulling itself out of the grave. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I sprinted across the grass, past rows of headstones and trimmed hedges, all the way to the caretaker's shed near the chapel. I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. Then I stared at the old wooden workbench, panting, trying to catch my breath while my brain tried to make sense of what I'd seen. That couldn't have been real. It couldn't. People don't just come back. But I'd seen it with my own eyes. That face. That dirt-caked flesh. The smell, like wet leaves mixed with rot, was still in my nostrils. I grabbed the only thing close to a weapon I had, a rusty shovel leaning against the wall. Not exactly tactical gear, but it made me feel a little less helpless. I waited. Minutes ticked by. Nothing. I cracked open the door and peeked outside. Silence. I stepped out slowly, shovel in hand. The grave was empty. Completely empty. No body, no fresh dirt, not even a trail. The ground looked untouched except for the cracked headstone. That's when I started hearing the sirens. Far off, toward town. One, then another, then more. Then silence again. I went back into the shed and turned on the radio. My hands were still shaking. The old emergency broadcast station was on loop. A voice droning. Repeat, stay inside your homes. Do not approach individuals showing signs of aggression or abnormal behavior. This is not a test. I stared at the speaker, heart sinking. This wasn't just one grave. It wasn't just here. I stepped outside again and scanned the cemetery. The wind was picking up, bending trees and pushing leaves across the grass. The place looked the same, calm, still. But then I saw something moving near the maintenance road. Another figure. This one walking, stumbling more like. Clothes torn, arms hanging limp. Head jerking from side to side like it didn't quite know where it was. I gripped the shovel tighter and ducked behind the hedge. The thing walked past without seeing me. I held my breath as it limped along the dirt path toward the backwoods. It wasn't until it disappeared behind the tree line that I exhaled. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the county emergency alert system lit up the screen. Lock all doors. Do not interact with the infected. They are extremely dangerous. Infected, I whispered to myself. That's when I knew. This wasn't just an emergency. This was something out of a nightmare, and I was in the worst possible place for it. I stood in the middle of hundreds of graves. Hundreds. And who knows how many were already crawling out from the dirt. I spent the next half hour checking every path, every section of the cemetery. I moved as quietly as I could, shovel in hand, ears straining for movement. Every leaf crunch made my heart jump. At the far side of Section B, I found another grave disturbed. The soil was torn up, loose and uneven, like something had burst upward. Another nearby, and another. 4 in total, every one of them recently buried. The one closest still had the casket half pushed open, dirt crusted on the corners. I looked inside, nothing. Just a torn burial suit and some scattered flowers. I was about to turn away when I heard footsteps. Fast, not shuffling, running. I crouched low behind a thick marble headstone. Then a girl came sprinting down the path from the northern fence. She was maybe 20, jeans, black hoodie, wild hair flying behind her. She looked like she'd run through a war zone. She saw me, froze, then pointed back the way she came. "They're coming," she whispered, hoarse. "We need to hide." I didn't ask questions, just waved her over and pulled her behind the stone. 3 seconds later, they came. 4 of them. Staggering, groaning. One missing an arm. Another with a twisted neck that made its head hang sideways. They didn't speak. Just moved like they were sniffing the air, turning their cloudy eyes toward every noise, every shadow. The girl beside me was trembling. "What happened?" I whispered. She shook her head, too shaken to speak. We waited until they passed. Then she looked at me, eyes wide. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "The town's gone. They tore through everything. I barely made it out." I didn't know what to say. We were surrounded by death. And now the dead were walking. The girl's name was Kayla. She was a college student from town, visiting her grandmother's grave when everything broke loose. She said she heard the screaming first, then the sirens, then people running through the streets, chased by things that weren't supposed to be alive. "I saw my neighbor," she whispered. "Mr. Henley. He's like 70? He came out of his house covered in scratches. I thought he needed help, but he looked right at me, then lunged. His face didn't look right. his eyes. She trailed off and started shaking again. We sat behind that headstone for a few more minutes, listening to the wind. Occasionally, we heard movement. Twigs snapping in the woods, distant footsteps, soft groaning carried on the breeze. But nothing close. Eventually, I led her to the caretaker's shed. It was the safest place I had. Thick wooden walls, solid lock, no windows. We shut the door, locked it, and sat in the dark. My old camping lantern gave us a soft glow. I handed her a bottle of water from the mini fridge and an emergency blanket. "I don't think it's a sickness," she said after a while. "I saw one of them get hit by a car, full speed. Its leg bent backwards, and it still got up, like it didn't feel anything. Just kept moving." I nodded slowly. "I saw one come out of a grave this morning. The grave was from last month." Her eyes widened. "So it's not just the town?" "No, it's not." We sat in silence after that. The radio kept repeating the same emergency message. I tried to reach someone, police, fire, even my boss, but no one picked up. All lines were dead. I managed to get one call through to a ranger station about 40 miles west. The voice on the other end sounded frantic, said the roads were blocked and no help was coming anytime soon. We were on our own. By noon, things got worse. I heard movement, more than before. A steady shuffle of feet, closer this time. I peeked out the shed's peephole and saw 5, maybe 6 of them wandering near the chapel. Then more emerged from the forest. They were spreading. I knew we couldn't stay in the shed forever. We had food for maybe 2 days and barely enough water. Besides, if even one of those things saw us go in, we'd be trapped. I still had my truck, a beat-up, mud-stained pickup I kept parked near the front gate. It was old but reliable. Only problem was, it was about a quarter-mile away, and the cemetery was no longer quiet. "I think we need to move before nightfall," I told Kayla. She didn't argue. We gathered what we could: flashlight, bottled water, first aid kit, a crowbar I kept in the corner, and a worn walkie-talkie I hadn't used in years. We didn't have weapons, not really, but we had tools. As we stepped out, I realized the wind had picked up again. The trees were swaying, casting strange shadows across the headstones. The place felt colder now, like the dead themselves were watching us. We moved slow, crouching behind monuments and hedges, trying not to make a sound. Halfway to the gate, we heard a scream. We froze. It came from the direction of the forest, short, sharp, then cut off. Then silence. Kayla clutched my arm. I looked around. Nothing moved. We kept going. The closer we got to the entrance, the worse it got. Bodies littered the walkways. Not just the risen, but others. Fresh, torn clothes, broken limbs. One lay right in front of the chapel's iron gate, face down, hand twitching. I stopped and squinted. Then its head turned. It wasn't gone. It was turning. The eyes were milky white, teeth bared. I let out a wet growl and started crawling toward us. I raised my shovel and stepped forward. I don't like hurting anything, never did, but this thing wasn't human anymore. I swung hard, straight down on the back of its neck. It stopped moving. Kayla covered her mouth and looked away. We didn't talk, just moved faster. The truck came into view behind the fence, still intact, keys in my pocket. Only thing between us and it was the front gate. And 3 of them standing by it. They weren't wandering. They were waiting, as if they knew. I whispered, "We have to distract them." She nodded and pointed toward the gravel path near the side wall. "There's a pile of broken stones there. We could throw one." It was risky, but it was all we had. I handed her the crowbar and crept along the outer hedge, careful not to draw their attention. Kayla did the same, crouching low, reaching the stone pile silently. She picked up a fist-sized chunk and hurled it into the woods behind the gate. It clattered through the branches, snapping twigs as it went. The three turned, slowly at first, then fast. They moved toward the noise like moths to a flame. "Now," I hissed. We bolted for the truck. I fumbled with the keys, heart racing. Opened the door, shoved Kayla inside, ran around the other side. One of them turned back. I slammed the door and hit the lock. Then I started the engine. It roared to life. All three of them spun around, groaning louder now, and started charging toward us. I floored the gas. The truck jolted forward, tires spitting gravel as we tore through the front gate. The metal scraped the side mirror, but I didn't care. We were out. Kayla was sobbing. I couldn't tell if it was from fear or relief. Probably both. We sped down the narrow road leading away from the cemetery, past the overgrown woods and rusting mile markers. My hands were tight on the wheel, eyes scanning the trees. Everywhere we looked, it felt like something might emerge, but the road was empty for now. "What do we do?" she asked, voice shaking. I didn't have a good answer. We survive. We didn't go into town, that would have been suicide. Instead, we took the back roads. Dirt trails I knew from years of hauling debris and supplies. My plan was to reach an old ranger station up in the hills. It hadn't been used in years, but it had solar panels, a water tank, and a radio tower. It took nearly an hour to get there, dodging fallen trees and overturned cars. We passed a school bus, empty, windows shattered. A house still smoking, its porch burned. Signs of chaos everywhere. At one point, we had to stop when a deer ran across the road, bloody and foaming at the mouth, eyes wild. It slammed into a tree and kept moving like nothing happened. Not just people then. Something deeper. We reached the ranger station just after 3 p.m. It was still standing. Boarded up, but solid. A heavy steel door and thick wooden walls. I parked the truck around back under the cover of pine trees. We went in through the emergency hatch in the rear wall. It smelled like dust and age, but it was safe. For now. We barred the doors, checked every room, set the radios to scan for signals. Nothing but static. But at least we were alive. I looked at Kayla, sitting on an old bench, eyes red but focused. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me back there." I nodded. Then I looked out the window toward the horizon. Smoke was rising from the direction of the town, a thick black column curling upward into the sky. Whatever this outbreak was, it was just getting started. And the dead weren't staying buried anymore. The ranger station creaked as the wind howled through the trees outside. It wasn't just wind anymore, though. Not in my ears. It sounded like whispers, like the forest itself was holding its breath. We'd made it to safety, or at least something close to it. But safety, during something like this, it's never permanent. Kayla was asleep on the cot in the corner, curled under a threadbare blanket. She hadn't slept since this began. Her breathing was shallow, her hands twitching even in rest. I stood at the narrow window looking out at the fading light. Dusk was crawling in, painting the horizon in smoky purples and reds, the kind of sunset you'd normally stop to admire. But now, it just meant one thing. Night was coming, and I had no idea what night would bring. I checked the radio again, still static. The ranger station's emergency system had a hand-cranked generator and a working shortwave transmitter, but no signal came through. It was like the rest of the world had gone silent. Until 6:42 p.m., That's when the radio crackled. A voice, faint, distant, through the noise. If anyone's hearing this, Outbreak confirmed in multiple cities. Repeat, multiple cities. Stay inside. Do not engage. Headshots only. They don't respond to pain. Then static again. It was barely more than a whisper, but it confirmed the worst. This wasn't isolated. It wasn't just my town. It wasn't just my cemetery. It was everywhere. I felt my stomach twist. I didn't tell Kayla right away. I let her sleep. Instead, I gathered supplies. There were a few old ranger kits in the station. Flares, maps, even a revolver with 6 rounds in it. I loaded it and put it in the drawer, hoping I'd never need it. The rest of the night passed slowly. Too slowly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the risen. Their cold, blank stares. Their twisted limbs moving like broken marionettes. I remembered the sound of their fingers scraping against stone. The way they clawed their way through soil like something deep inside them remembered being alive. The next morning brought a heavy mist. The sun was a pale blur behind the clouds. Kayla and I sat on the porch of the station, sipping instant coffee from cracked mugs. "We can't stay here forever," she finally said. "I know." She looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you think there's anything left out there?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes, someone would come, that this would all be fixed, but I couldn't. "I don't know," I said truthfully, "but I know we're still breathing. That's something." She nodded and didn't say more. Around midday, we spotted movement on the trail. We ducked inside, watching from the slats in the shutters. It wasn't just 1 or 2. It was a group, maybe 10 of them. They weren't moving fast, just shambling up the trail like they had all the time in the world. A few were missing arms. One dragged a broken foot behind it. Another looked like it had been a firefighter once, charred uniform still clinging to its frame. They didn't make sounds, not until they got closer. Then, as if sensing something, they all stopped and turned right toward the station. Kayla gasped. "They can smell us," I whispered, or something like it. We backed away from the windows. I could hear their groaning grow louder. Then, thump. A heavy slam against the front door. I grabbed the revolver. "Back room," I told her, "now." We shut ourselves inside the supply room, locking the door behind us. The thudding continued, wood splintering slowly with every blow. They weren't strong, not individually, but together, they were relentless. I knew we had a few minutes, maybe less. There was a small escape hatch behind the emergency lockers. It led to the slope behind the station, down into the brush. Meant for fire evacuations or bear sightings. Never thought I'd use it for something like this. I handed Kayla the crowbar and slid the hatch open. "You first." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind." She crawled into the tunnel. I turned and looked at the door one last time. The frame was bending. The hinges screamed, and then crack. The top corner split. I dropped down into the tunnel and pulled the hatch shut behind me just as the door gave in. The crawl space was tight, but it led us downhill fast. We emerged under a fallen tree about 100 yards from the ranger station. We could see it through the pines, dark figures now swarming through it, breaking furniture, overturning shelves. One of them stepped out onto the porch. It sniffed the air. I held my breath. Kayla clutched my sleeve. Then it turned the other way and walked back inside. We didn't wait. We ran. For hours, we hiked through the woods. No trail, no clear destination, just away. Every snap of a twig made us freeze. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. By late afternoon, we stumbled upon an old firewatch tower. Rusted, leaning slightly, but intact. We climbed the metal steps one by one, holding our breath with every creak. The top platform gave us a view of the valley. Smoke still rose from the town. Beyond it, far in the distance, we saw what looked like a highway. Abandoned cars lined both lanes. Some still smoking, some flipped. But past the wreckage, we saw something else. A light, faint, blinking. It could have been a signal tower, or a generator, or maybe, just maybe other survivors. Kayla pointed. There. We have to go there. I nodded. The sun was setting again. 12 hours ago, I was raking leaves between rows of graves, thinking about lunch. Now, I was standing in a fire tower, armed with a crowbar, watching the world fall apart. But we were still here. Somehow. I don't know what comes next. Maybe we reach that blinking light. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe the world has already slipped too far into whatever this is. But if there's a chance any chance that others made it, we'll find them. I'm just a groundskeeper. I don't know how to fix any of this, but I know how to survive. I know how to hide. I know how to run. And if I have to, if it comes to that, I know how to fight. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe the world has already slipped too far into whatever this is. But if there's a chance any chance that others made it, we'll find them. I'm just a groundskeeper. I don't know how to fix any of this, but I know how to survive. I know how to hide. I know how to run. And if I have to, if it comes to that, I know how to fight. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.